Romans chapter 4 and Hebrews chapter 11. Gosh, I can remember used to most every message I preached 35 years ago. You started out in Hebrews chapter 11. The great heroes of faith is what we call it, the faith chapter. And
What did you say in Romans?
Romans 4 and Hebrews 11. Okay. I want to read something, a little note, some things that I had written before we get started here. And I just kind of asked a question to start this note out. Why the hard times, the world sometimes calls them tragedies, happen in our life. And so I made this note, or I wrote this little note about events. Because the Bible is a book and about hills and valleys. So, I mean, that's what it's a book about hills and valleys, which is the journey of the divine in the dimension of the physical.
Yes.
It's up and down. That's the way, and it works that way. And it's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It just is that way. I mean, it's night and day, or cold and hot. And so,
That's wonderful.
in that you have this thing we call tension. So let me read you these notes and see if you can associate with them. Okay, if not, then maybe it will with somebody. Everybody on the planet Earth is on a journey towards spiritual perfection or maturity. Just kind of put a pause right there and say this. Most people on the planet don't know that. They don't have a clue. I talked with a young man in the shop this past week, and I was doing something for a trailer or something. I forgot what he had. And I just started talking to him about my life situations when I was close to his age. And I said, you know, in my life at that time, I was in a lot of stress and a lot of different circumstances, up and down, extremes up and downs, you know, of my own making, my own creation. And he said, you know, I just had a stroke. I said, you're kidding me. I said, you're too young. And I said, I'll guarantee you the results of the reason for that stroke at your young age. This guy's in his mid-30s. I said, just stress. Stress, and probably along the side of the stress was a little bit of riotous living. I said, I bet you're right. How'd you know that? I mean, you know, boy, I am a prophet right here, but I'm reading your mail. And I said, probably what happened because of your position where your circumstances had put you, I bet you had an emotional experience that brought you to probably a place that your parents taught you, that your grandparents taught you, that your great-parents taught you, that if you're in America and an American, you've been taught this. And I said, that was, you surrendered to Jesus. You're right. You know, oh yeah, you are a prophet, you're reading my mail. I said, however, if you'd been in China and that happened, you would have surrendered to Buddha. Or if you'd been in India and that happened in your life, you would have surrendered to Allah. I said, do you think that Allah or Buddha or Jesus are any different in your life's experience and their ability to assist you? He didn't know what to say. He didn't know where to go from there because I did. He was now his brain's all out of kilter. He can't even think good now. You know what? You know, he's looking at me like a cow at a new gate. I give up. I'm lost now. But it's so true for all of us, and I'm not trying to put one down over the other. I'm just trying to say life experiences happen to all of us, but they happen in our life's journey for an awakening in our personal life. And the Bible is all about this whole concept and idea, if and as we learn to read it. So, again, let me read this note to you again. That's kind of a side note that I wanted to say. Everybody on the planet Earth is on a journey towards spiritual perfection and maturity. And again, like I said, most don't know it. Everything in life, good times and bad times, are pointing you to that reality, a spiritual awakening. And on this path, things happen. What we call good things and or bad things. But why? Many, if not most of the time, things happen and we label them good or bad when they're just events that's happening. They're not good or bad. They're not right or wrong. They're just events that happen. They seem to be bad only to reveal you to you. Things happen in life to each one of us to reveal to myself what I am made up of or what I am carrying inside of me. And at this point, let me recommend a book to all of you that is just phenomenal. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. And the name of the book is, the name just went away. He wrote this book about 15, 16, 17 years ago. And gosh, it seemed like it's a book about love. I'm sorry, I thought I had it right there, but you have to read this book. It's just a phenomenal book by Don Miguel Ruiz. He was a medical doctor and he had an accident and had a death experience. You call it bad. It was an awakening time. He's on the spiritual journey. But he thinks he's on a journey to become a great physician. But anyway, his books are phenomenal. All of his books are just that way. So, these events happen to reveal you to you. Things happen in life to each one of us to reveal to myself what I am made up of and what I carry inside of me. The reason for this is so I can free myself and here's something that I'm really driving hard at, is for us, every person in the world, to learn to take responsibility for themselves, where they are and what they do and what they say, rather than blame it on somebody. Because I have a tendency, living in the natural world, to blame my circumstances on somebody, some situation, or something else other than myself, rather than to take responsibility. And the sad thing is, and I hate this, in Christianity, we are taught not to take responsibility, but just give it to Jesus, and it's going to be okay. But we never take the responsibility for it, and therefore we never realize we are really empowered to do something about it. But anyway, the reason for this is so I can free myself for the next step I'm destined to make. Because all of us are destined for the next rung of the ladder. But wouldn't it be a shame to live my whole life and not ever make that next rung, or make the next step, or move into the next thing that I am destined for in my spiritual journey? I think it would be. When I react out of anger or fear, which for all of us, and I'm talking to myself, that's most of the time. When circumstances and situations show up, most of the time I will react instead of respond. And most of the time that's out of a fear base, and I don't realize it and don't recognize it. When I react out of anger or fear, then I have unsettled issues inside me. In other words, pains, hurts, disappointments, abuses, letdowns, and so forth are the events or the things that I'm carrying from my past. These are all like a splinter deep inside of me. They will manifest in ways that will cause the old issues to surface again. However, the real truth is you are being promoted. I hope you can hear this. You are moving another rung up the ladder. And there's not a one of us that moves another rung up the ladder without both great resistance and great effort. All you got to do is get a ladder, a natural ladder, and try to climb up to the next rung of it. And you'll see there's a resistance of the earth pulling you back down. And there's also that discipline that you have to exert yourself to push yourself up the next rung. You have to do that. It's nobody doing it for you. However, the real truth is you are being promoted. You're moving another rung up the ladder. In other words, God is showing you to go deeper. And this is something I think that we have to realize. The deeper I go in me, the greater I can reach higher. Because, see, going deeper, I'm not just going to dig out the things of a painful past. I'm going to dig out the things of a powerful future, because I'll dig into the depth of who God is, which is inside me. So the real truth is, you're being promoted, you're moving another rung up the ladder. God is showing you to go deeper because you're being prepared to move higher, move into your best yet. You are to go deep because the plans are for you to go up. You go deeper only to go higher. Dreams and lives, circumstances happen in life always to reveal you to you. Even though someone else may have initiated your reaction or your response, and you always, every time, will start to either blame them or blame this or blame something. Someone may have pulled in front of you and almost caused you to wreck. And you shot them a bird. I mean, that's what I wrote, so I just say it. You shot them a bird, or, that's what most people do. I mean, I have them do that to me when I really didn't mean to do that. My mind just... Have you ever done something and your mind was not there present where you was at because it's somewhere else? I mean, I have this year, I think a couple of times this year, gone in, paid for gas, got back in my car and drove off without the gas. Now that is just dumb. But I've done that, okay? I've actually done it. Why? Because my mind wasn't present. Wasn't where it needed to be. It was either back in some event, something passed, something startled me, something arose fear inside me. And that happened to me. So I'm not talking about any of y'all, or some of y'all, if any of you can relate to this. Actually, all of you can. Everybody can, because it's living life. Someone may have pulled out in front of you and almost caused you to wreck, and so you shot them a bird, or you began to curse them. Or your spouse, your loved one, said something the wrong way. In other words, said it to you in a way that you thought they said one thing when they meant another, something totally entirely different. And you took it in a way that they didn't mean it or weren't thinking. You got mad or you got angry, and the battle or the war began. Now, I know that's never happened to y'all, but I'm talking to me again. All out of misunderstanding and are being misinformed. I've been listening to a set of CDs by Bruce Lipton called The Wisdom of Your Sales. It is just as phenomenal. And I've had this set of series for probably 12 years. Me and Francisco used to listen to him a lot when he worked for me. And I've been re-listening and visiting that again. And boy, it's just so resonating with me, because he begins to talk about our sales many times create our next step in life, because our sales begin to get together a belief, and many times that false belief is not true, but the sales begin to gather around that and create thoughts in my mind that aren't true, but they seem to be true, and I respond off of that. So I'm responding off of information that's not true, thinking that it is true. And boy, for me, that's really hit home. For me, that has really hit home. And so, if you haven't got Bruce Lipton's The Wisdom of Your Sales, it's a tremendous set of teachings. It's all out of misunderstanding. How many times does it happen to all of us? And then, again, I go back to the same book I mentioned the first of the year, and that's Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, because he has an entire chapter devoted to this whole concept and this idea. God, or the universe, or nature, in Egyptian mythology, the word natura means gods, the same as the Hebrew Elohim, or nature, will constantly give us situations, circumstances to reveal you to you or me to me. It's like a compass that's really showing us the way. So, Selah, I read you that and let you pause and meditate on it. And then I will come back to this about Abraham. And I started out with this thing several weeks ago on Abraham the Hebrew. The Hebrew, not a Hebrew. A lot of people think he was a Hebrew, meaning he has a designation of either skin color, hair texture, etc. And in that designation, these special more than you are. But again, failing to look at Abraham, Sarai, and Sarah as a mirror of myself and realize I am Abram, I am Abraham, I am Sarai, I am Sarah. I fail to realize that because I've been told this is a historical character that lived. And therefore it's hard for me to associate myself in the story as myself. And so I want to point out some things about that story. And that's exactly how he's called. In the first place you'll see the word Hebrew in Genesis 14. He's called the. That's a designation. When he's the Hebrew, he's not a Hebrew. He's referring as a myth or as a story or as a type to the whole human race. And that's what Paul calls him in Romans chapter 4 right here, which we'll read. He calls him the father of us all. Us all actually means, and he says very clearly, Abraham was the heir of the world. Not just a group of people, but the whole world, you and me both. And so we'll see that here in this story here in the book of Romans chapter 4. So if you found that place in your Bible and you want to read with me or look with me on this, and let's just start in verse 11 and several notes that I would like to pay attention to. Verse 11, it says, "And he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of faith." That's the word pisteuo, from the root pistis, which is translated faith, belief, and trust. It should have been translated trust all the way through and not faith and not belief. Because you can be taught to believe all kinds of things and it doesn't have anything to do with really what we are taught to call faith. And what we're taught to call faith really should be trust. And that trust should be based in the depth of our inner being to the source or to the power or to that one we call God. And in Christianity we would call him Jesus or call it Jesus. So this word pisteuo, I'll just read it that way. The righteousness of the pisteuo, faith, which he had yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of all of them that believe. That's exactly the same word, pisteuo. Do you see what I'm saying? Should have been trust. Though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. And the father of circumcision to them who are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of that faith, pisteuo, of our father Abraham, which he had being yet uncircumcised. You see what he's saying? He's saying even though he wasn't a circumcised Jew or Hebrew, he was still given this simply because of a trust, and he become the typology of you and me, with or without circumcision, that we would become the same as him, the source. That's basically what Paul is saying right here. Verse 13 says, "For the promise that he should be the heir of the world." See that? We were told it's just a certain nation and a certain city and a certain group of people that make up that nation and that city. They're the chosen ones. They're the ones that become the servants of the Most High God. You and me are not chosen. You and me are just stepkids. And, you know, we get on. We just get in by faith, hallelujah, and whatever, and da-da-da-da. But you live on the outer perimeters of the city. So everything will be in there close. That's all a bunch of lies. But we've taught to believe those lies as though they were the truth. And then we call them the truth when in actuality they're lies. So he says, for verse 14, "For if they which are of the law be heirs, faith is made void, and the promise is made of no effect, because the law works wrath. For where no law is, there is no transgression. Therefore it is of pisteuo," that means trust, that it might be by grace. You see, if you trust God, the grace of God is the sustaining power of God to do what you can't do in any situation, circumstance. It ain't based off your faith. It ain't based off the law. It ain't based off anything other than God's ability. And that's why we have falsely called grace God's ability. But it is God's ability. It is God's power to do what you can't do. So if we learn to trust that, wow, learn to trust it. Not believe it, not have faith in it, because when you do that, most likely you're projecting your faith off on something or somebody else. It's not a trust that you have deep in your heart. And if you believe it is something that somebody's told you and you try to simulate your brain around it as a system. Therefore, verse 16, therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to who? All of the seed. Not to only that which is the law, but to that also which is of pistuos, there it is, trust again, of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations before him who he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead and calleth things that be not as though they were. Even God who does that. Because God does that deep inside you and me. If we begin to hear His voice and we respond to the voice of that one which is calling something into another form of being, then we will come in harmony with that. We'll come in line with that voice. Verse 18. Who against hope believed in hope that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so will your seed be. Being not weak in pistuo, there again, trust. He considered not his own body, now dead. He was 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in trust. Okay. Now I want you to go with me to the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, that we call the Great Faith chapter. And you know, that used to be my whole, again, most of my messages were built around Hebrews chapter 11 or either Mark chapter 11, you know, where you go back to Mark and Jesus and you know, hit sight of the mountain, dear God. You know, that was the basis of most of my sermons were based. Most of my messages, my teachings were based off these. But now they've taken a whole completely different swing, and I begin to look at that and I begin to see that this trust is something I can cultivate in me by listening to that inner voice and learning to follow that and learning to obey that voice and begin to get confidence in that. So right here, let's look at this, verse 8, Hebrews 11, verse 8. It says, by faith, again, trust, pistuo, Abram, when he was called to go out into. Now that's a really a strange term, go out into. It's just exactly what the sun does every morning. It goes out of the darkness into the light. It's called resurrection. It's called being raised. That's exactly what the sun does. That's exactly what God told Abram to do. When he was saying, he used the Hebrew word in Genesis 11 and Genesis chapter 12. When he called him to go out and into, it's the Hebrew word le'ek le'on. And actually the word means in Hebrew, go from your outer visional circumstances to that which is within you. So you go from without to within. And so what do you go to when you go within? Well, you go to two places. And he tells you that in the Old Testament. We'll look at them in just a minute, but let me read it on right here. Go out into a place which should afterward receive for an inheritance and obey. And he went out, not knowing whether he went. See, he's trusting the voice. He's not looking at circumstances, he's trusting. By verse 9, by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of this same promise. For he looked for a city which had foundations, whose builder and maker was God. Wow. If we, as we get this total beautiful truth and revelation, we realize that city is within me as well as that God is within me, and the foundation of my being and everything I am and everything I'm about is resident within the core of my being. And that, that even Scripture's soul makes that clear, especially in the Hebrew as we begin to look at it. So go with me to Genesis chapter 11 now. Genesis chapter 11. And let's read it. Get this book. I want to read something out of this book. My table don't want to. There we go. Now, it'll hold it right there. Okay. Genesis chapter 11. Everybody found it there?
Yes.
And look at verse 31. And Terah, that Terah is Abram's father, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur. I want you to see where they're coming from. Where are they coming from? What does it say? What does your Bible say? They came from where? Ur?
Yeah.
Right? Now, I want you to hold your finger right there and go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 3. Everybody got it? And God said, let there be Ur. In Hebrew it's called Or. O-O-R. Or. It's called light. Do you know that every one of us can be proven now that an atom, which builds the physical body through cells, through constant addition, which is a medical miracle they don't really figure out, they don't really know how that it does it, but they do know, they know for a fact that within 16 days you have what's built in your body. This is what you look like in 16 days. Now, you can look at this and you can kind of, this is called a primal streak. A primal streak in medical terms. This forms as a result of the seed, which is or light, that come from the Father's source. And I hope you can get this. I know you can get this. I know you can get this. When the seed came from the Father's source, it separated itself from the source. Didn't it? It's no longer within the bowels of the Father, the man, the male. It has come forth. It has ejaculated, right? It has begun a journey of its own. However, that seed is O-O-R in Hebrew, or we call it light, L-I-G-H-T. Now, isn't it amazing? Or it's called Ur. I mean, it's found in a lot of words. And the phenomenal thing about this word appears again in Genesis chapter 3. And it's translated for the word curse, and immediately when you hear the word curse, and I hear the word curse, immediately I am taught to think something bad, terrible, negative. However, the Hebrew word curse is or. It's light on light, or light in light. Do you know what light on light, or light that has left its source to go into a dark place, it's still light. And yet they translate this word curse or light on light when it's really light from without that's having tension on the light from within, and they give it the word curse to try to emphasize the tension. The tension is a normal, what we would call struggle, but it's not a struggle, it's a normal tension to be what you're designed to be, what I'm designed to be. To move up the next rung of the ladder takes tension, pressure, struggle. That's not good or bad. I look at it, if I'm turned to call, oh, something bad, terrible's happened to me. No, something wonderful's happening to you because you're being promoted. God's having you bump you up a little bit. Sometimes you need a little encouragement. So this light, but now I want you to get this. This light, I'm going to call this light, light, L-I-G-H-T, light or power, P-O-W-E-R, because that's what it is. Now when this seed comes out of this male, enters this canal and begins the journey, it's separate from its source now. It's no longer within its source, right?
Right.
But it has the imprint, the diagram of everything that the source had for it to have. It still has that. And if I were to call this light spirit, because I can, because that's what it is, it's the same thing. If I were to call this light spirit, now then the spirit has sent something from it. Spirit, I can also call it breath. Spirit has something that encodes, just like if I took a glass of water, dipped it out of the ocean and brought it up here, it still has the ingredients that the ocean, it just doesn't have the content. Is that correct?
Yes.
Absolutely it does. So when that seed left with an imprint, a diagram, a pattern. It left with that which it was designed, and what it did, God designed something that would be able to carry that imprint. That something was called soul. So if you want to know what your soul is the DNA, it's the atom, it's the cell that builds the physical structure in the womb of your mama. Because the spirit is not in there doing that now. Because the seed has separated itself from the spirit source. And so when the soul gets this primal streak right here, and this is exactly what it looks like. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 7 of these little, makes it look like a little worm, don't it? You know what this is? This is your brain and your backbone all the way down to your sacrum, which looks something like that. It's your whole nervous system. And in each one of these 7 little humps in this primal streak is the imprint of what that one needs to grow in that physical structure of the body. It's just the most... And then after it gets the house built, God's house built, guess what? It begins to go through travail, doesn't it? And you begin to have, what? Birth pains, right? And what happens when the birth pains continue to get stronger and stronger? You do what? You push this now that has become a fully developed being, you push it out into this physical world, into this physical dimension, at which time, guess what happens? Spirit joins back in with it, and the first thing that that baby has to do before it can do anything in this dimension, it has to do one thing first. Do y'all know what? It has to breathe. It has to bring the spirit right back into it. And so you actually completed a complete cycle where God designed something, put it in the physical world as itself, built it, and then moved back into its house. Hallelujah. And this is exactly what the story of Abraham is telling us as the Hebrew of God, which that's us. So if you'll notice again back over here, notice what it says. He says in verse 31, Terah took Abram's son, Lot's son of Haran, and his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with him from Ur of what?
Chaldees.
From Ur of the Chaldees. From Ur of the Chaldees. And the Chaldees are Kesdim. That's who they are. It just simply means they come from the place of light. And notice what they do. Notice what happened. And they came, where did they come to first?
To the land of Canaan.
They go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran first. They're going to Canaan, but they come to where? Haran first. Now Haran actually means an elevated place or a higher state of consciousness. And it's a state of consciousness that brings you to enlightenment. Now you and I, when we were pressed out of the womb, Spirit, God, Source, come right back into us and is with us and stays with us all the days of our life, there to both empower us from within and empower us from without. Because He is the Source. He works in unison with the soul which He designed, which is the core. I could say it's the center of your being, the very essence of who you are, your whole neurological working system. I'd say it's the same thing. But the first place you have to come to is Haran, which actually is a place of enlightenment where we come to a place that we will open ourselves up to that which we have within us, which is the light, which is the revelation, which is the knowledge, which is that which God is. And as we do that, then we move from there into Canaan. And guess what Canaan means? It means material existence. And in the land of Canaan, or the land of material existence, we experience something. Let's go over to Deuteronomy. Let's see if I can find this. I may not. I think I might have it marked. Let's just go over here to Deuteronomy 6 or 8. I know it's here somewhere. Deuteronomy 11. Yeah, go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 11. The land of Canaan. That song you sing, I guess, could go with that. Isn't that song they sing, Canaan land? Isn't that a kind of a, my only glory? Isn't that amazing how that they have taken Canaan land and projected it out into somewhere in heaven, isn't it?
Yes.
But actually the word Canaan means material existence. So it has to do with this world. It doesn't have to do with another world. It has to do with this world. And look at how it's described right here. In Deuteronomy chapter 11 verse 10 it says, for the land where you go in to possess, see, notice, we're going to possess Canaan. We do possess Canaan. Is not as the land of Egypt, from which you came out, where you sowed your seed and you watered it with your foot and garden as a garden of herbs. What that's just simply saying is that Egypt was like a desert that had a river flowing through it. It was flat. And the only way that you can get the water to the source is through your work, through what you can do, through physical labor. Do you see what I'm saying? Physical. That's what Egypt represents. It just represents that physical labor of toiling. It's not bad. It just, that's what it represents. So he says it watered it with your foot. In other words, you had to build irrigation ditches. You had to work. But, verse 11, but the land where you go to possess is a land of what?
Hills.
Hills and valleys. The word hills in Hebrew is har, and actually it means it's a land of promotion. It's a land that's going to give you a promotion, and the only way you can go into the promotion, the hill, the higher place, is you've got to go into the valley first. It's amazing you sang that song, valley, because the valley actually is bokach in Hebrew, and actually the word means to be open. In other words, where is your valley? It's the place that you seem to be brought low, that if you're not open to the situation, you won't see the circumstance, or you won't see the Spirit, you won't see the power of God that's there to promote you and move you back up the hill. It's not a place out yonder somewhere in glory or in heaven. It's a place right here that we, as the Hebrew of God, the chosen ones, that's everybody, that's all of us, it's for here, it's for us right now to be what God has called us to be, so that we can be the Hebrew. Remember, the Hebrew is the one who is the eye of God, that's become the house of God, that's allowed God to breathe me. That's every human being. Because there's not anybody on earth that's alive that's not being breathed. And if you're being breathed, you're being breathed by the Spirit that's entered back into you. And the Spirit enters back into you to empower you, to expand you, to move you, and to move us up. So we are being promoted. Hallelujah. Every one of us are being moved up into a higher dimension in God. Amen. I will just quit or unhook right there. I wanted to read you, I'm sorry, I meant to read this. Let me just read this while I'm here. I want to read this to you about Canaan. Canaan means material existence, or it's a low place, or it makes you think you're inferior. That's what it said. Canaan means lowland. That is the body consciousness. The redeemed body is the promised land. When man rediscovers this lost domain, all the promises of the Scriptures will be fulfilled. It is not a dream that man is to possess an immortal body. It is a solid fact. In order to redeem the body, man must enter with his spiritual thoughts into his organism and teach it the saving truth. Selah. We have to enter into ourselves. See, it's not this one or that one's fault. It's myself. I've chosen this journey. You must enter, let's see, spiritual thoughts into his organism and teach it. Teach yourself the saving truth. Metaphysically, it represents humbleness and receptivity. The land of Canaan, too, a being in which man is placed and to which he gives character through trust in God as omnipresent Spirit. The mystic, to a mystic, it is the name of an invisible substance that surrounds and interpenetrates all forms. So Canaan is not where I'm going. Canaan's where I'm living. It's where I'm at. It's where I am. And as I open myself to teaching, to the higher places, I'm going to continue to get promoted and pushed up the mountain, get up there where I long to be, where I long to go. Because my inner being is constantly pulling at me. I mean, yours is, mine is, all of us. Our inner being is pulling us up higher, pulling us up into God in a greater dimension. Anybody have a question? Kirby said there's time for just one.
You can explain a little bit more about the soul there, how you did it on the board. I know you have many, many times, but the way you explained it here.
Okay, the way the soul, see, most of us are taught to use spirit and soul synonymously. And most people do. Most people do use spirit and soul synonymously. But there's nothing about the spirit. The spirit is pure, period. It's holy. It's all of those characteristics that we think of as God. So it's hard for us to associate in our mind how spirit can be in someone who seems to be unholy and impure. That's it's almost like putting on the brake. How can God be in someone who's a murderer or a child molester? How could that possibly be? But yet spirit is breath, and as long as that breath is in that person, the Spirit of God is there, resident, present there. And so it's hard for us to understand that because of, again, teachings. So we use spirit and soul synonymously. The thing about the soul is that it has the design of God, so therefore it carries in it the content of God without being that. So the soul can be deposited in a dimension, any dimension, whether it's 3 dimension, 4 dimension, 5 dimension, or whatever, simply because it's designed to be that way. And so when the soul is deposited in that dimension, i.e. when the seed, the sperm, was ejaculated from the source, it left the source. It carried in it the imprint of the source. It became the soul. And when it returns back to the source as the soul, back into the spirit, it carries with it a lot of the code or drama it picked up in the physical dimension. That's where the people come up with the term karma. And so much confusion between karma and sowing seed. Sowing a seed reaps a harvest. Karma hadn't got anything to do with that. But so many times people say, well, that's your karma. It's not. That's just the harvest from your seeds that you sow. It's not your karma. Your karma are the things that your soul picked up and carried through your existence in the life physical dimension. So your soul can pick up a trauma, like a child can be abused as a child. Many different ways, not just sexual, verbal, physical. All of us experience that going through living life. And it's not like it's mom and daddy's fault. It's like mom and daddy didn't know because they were taught the same thing that they were doing, not knowing they were ignorant to what they were doing. I think that we can all say that and recognize it's true. And so in that, as a child, we carry scars. And the best word for it in the Hebrew Scriptures is the word pain. P-A-I-N-E, pain. Which in Hebrew is chata'ah, which got translated for the word sin. And in Greek in the New Testament is harmatia, which got translated for the word sin. If it had been translated for the word pain, it would have made a lot more sense for us. But nevertheless, there were 2 words in Hebrew, chata'ah and chatah. Chatah means to miss the mark. Chata'ah means to have pain inferred upon you. Not something you did, something that was inferred, something that come from without and it caught you. Well, you carry that in your soul. You don't carry that in your spirit. You carry it in your soul. And that's why it tells you in the New Testament that we seek the salvation of our soul. In other words, you want your soul healed. You want your soul redeemed from that. You know why? Because if it's not, when the soul leaves the body with the last breath, because it does, it marries the spirit when it comes back in at birth. merges back with the Spirit as one. Even though they're separate, they're still one, as like a union. And so when the breath leaves the body, brings the soul with it. So, ready for your next incarnation. Well, if that soul has got unsettled business, pain in your heart, most people live their whole life that way and exit with the pain still in them. It's sort of like that guy says, don't live your life and leave your song in you. I mean, that's one way to say that. In other words, sing your song. Own your pain. That's what Revelations 21 means when Jesus said, as I overcame. What's the idea behind that? The idea behind that was I had pain or scars or soul imprints that I needed to overcome them. I needed to settle them. I need to forget them. I need to forgive them. I need to let them go. Why? Because they're like a cancer in my being. And as a cancer in my being, they wreak havoc in my physical body. So the soul is that important ingredient that we have. And in Scripture, the Hebrew word for soul and the Hebrew word in Greek for soul is not the word for spirit in either place. Simply because Scripture doesn't teach them to be the same thing, but they are married. The only time the soul is separate from the spirit is that time of incubation, where it's building the physical temple house body that God's going to move right back into.
Would you say the soul is the mind, will, and emotions?
I would. I attach the soul to the physical because the soul has the ability to be egoic and it's not dominant. By that I just simply mean the soul will attach to the ego and allow the ego to destroy your life, or the soul, through the power of the Spirit, can teach the ego to submit and serve your life. It's not right or wrong either way. It just happens. Do you understand? Does that make any kind of sense at all? So that stuff can happen because it's ego-driven that we would call bad. It's not anybody's fault. I mean, that's the hard thing. It's bless God, my mom and daddy, if they hadn't done that to me and they'd taught me better, I'd be all right. They taught you all they knew to teach you. They carried their own pain. And if we can learn to forgive that and settle that issue. And some people grow up in surroundings where the environment is more peaceful and some people don't. Some people grow up in an environment of total chaos. And they get affected by that, are infected by that. We all do. So does that make it a little clearer? Or
It does make it clearer, but it still isn't completely clear to me. I'm just trying to...
No, I understand that. I think that's good because for me, I grapple over the spirit and soul for a long, long time because I can see by the usage of both the Hebrew and Greek words, they're not the same. And so therefore I can't use them as synonyms because they are not the same. So how could they be linked? And to be honest with you, I haven't been able to find any good books that I could possibly read or tell you, read this book to give you a clear distinction. I have, out of grappling and needing and just study, try to figure it out, gotten a grasp of what I see the Scripture says about the soul and the spirit. And I can understand the soul is that carries the karmic imprint. So karma then, by Hindu teaching, is not bad things happening to you because you did bad things. That's sowing and reaping. That's a natural law. You get to get what you sow, what you give comes back. That's a natural law. Karma is a spiritual law that the soul brings with it that has to do with the pains that have overcome you instead of you overcoming them. So that, I could say it's a part of the work in incarnation. It's part of is a part of the work that we have. I mean, some people say, well, the child came here with that karmic imprint, that karmic, and sometimes you can actually see that more so in other times. I mean, so for me, it's clear but hard to say.
Well, I was thinking like the intuitiveness that is part of us, and I'm thinking just really individually me, that when I know that I would like to come to this higher part of myself in a certain situation, I'm not there, but I see that there's a higher way to become more of a beautiful me. Not that I'm not beautiful, and that. So would that be your spirit that is reaching for who you truly are, that your soul is reaching for? I'm thinking of a certain situation, and I know that because I have this longing in myself to be more of who I am in this situation. So is that my soul that's intuitive, reaching for my higher self?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Your soul carries within it the senses of the higher nature, the spirit, which is intuitive and experiential, which are like the caduceus, which are like the two serpents on the pole. That's a symbol of the soul. They are intuitive and experiential. Both your intuition and your experience will experience and will see, smell, feel, taste, and hear your 5 physical senses, because they are interwoven together. Because the caduceus on the pole, as it comes up, it's woven into the head, where all of the 4 organs, we have 4 organs in our head, and then our whole outer body, skin is an organ, so the sense of feel is the largest organ we've got, but nevertheless, it is an organ. And it feels. Because it feels, it can experience, which is more a soul or intuitive. They're the connection of the caduceus that connect the lower nature to the upper nature. So to make up the 7 senses: see, smell, taste, touch, and hear, experience, and intuit. Does that help?
It helps, yes.
They're all woven together just like a cloth of many colors. So they connect to each other.
So when I was in my mom's womb, so I don't really get my soul until after I come out of my mother's womb?
Oh no, the soul came in with the seed.
Oh, okay, okay.
And the soul carried the design of the spirit as the seed, but it left the spirit. See, the sperm, when the father ejaculates the sperm, they're no longer attached. It's no longer there. So what can carry spirit into the soul can? Why? Because it's made up of spirit. Whatever spirit is, soul has that design in it. So that it can build that, and then after the full gestation of that house, temple, body, comes back out, the first thing that joins it is spirit again.
But only when it breathes.
Only if it breathes. If it doesn't breathe, guess what?
It don't.
It was a house that was built in the womb that was not used in this dimension at this time. And that happens quite often. That does happen quite often. And I have heard a lot of different definitions as to why that happens. Many times it could be because somehow or another the spirit foresaw that house was not prepared or whatever properly for this time. And so it just dissolved it. Now, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I have a lot of speculative ideas as to why that happens, because I don't think God makes mistakes. And I don't think no child, born or unborn, is a mistake. So, you know, I know we have a whole lot of questions right in these areas right here. Why
You
the
know,
bad
the
thing?
spirit lives in the body, and a lot of things the spirit wants to experience.
Yes.
Even that,
Yes. How can the spirit experience
if it doesn't happen.
if it can't move in there with it? You know, and gosh, it's such a beautiful story. It's all through the scriptures. That's what happens with Jacob. When Jacob, which is just a picture of this, the physical body, what does it need? It needs to be touched, and it's walked different. That whole story has to do with the breath coming into the physical body, going through the lungs, into the blood, into the marrow, the core of the body. So that's God experiencing us to the very core of our being. Okay?
And we go through a lot of things here that someone else is gonna go through, and you've already been through it, lived through it, and you can help them along the way to grow, because you've already went through it. And I think that's one reason too, that we go through things, because it's how we look at things.
That book that I was mentioning right when we started by Don Miguel Ruiz, I think it's Something Love. Seems like it's Something Love. It is just the most profound book. Highly recommend you. I'll bring it next week. Should have brought it this morning because I was using some information that he uses in one chapter in it. But he wrote that book 15, 16, 18 years ago. Good, real good book. I think it's Something Love, and I can't remember. Okay. Thank y'all.